Last month, Phil Spencer said people were basically trolling by claiming the Xbox Series X could be held back due to Microsoft's decision to make all their first-party games cross-gen and not releasing any of those games exclusively on the Xbox Series X for at least 2 years. Here's what he said. Frankly, held back is a meme that gets created by people who are too caught up in device competition. Yes, every developer is going to find a line and say, that is the hardware that I'm going to support, but the diversity of hardware choice in PC has not held back the highest fidelity PC games on the market. The highest fidelity PC games rival anything that anybody has ever seen in video games. So this idea that developers don't know how to build games or game engines or ecosystems that work across a set of hardware, there's a proof point in PC that shows that's not the case. But since then, there is a growing concern that spans from journalists, tech enthusiasts, and more that Xbox One is indeed going to hold back the Xbox Series X. And these people aren't who you would consider as trolls. Just today, IGN's Ryan McCaffrey, who's IGN's Xbox guy, said, I was wrong to drink the current gen won't hold back next gen Kool-Aid. I've talked to enough people now. It might make sense for some games, but not AAA system seller kinds of big budget productions. Cut bait on the old hardware. I want to see what the new stuff can do. He further says, it sounded good on paper, but not in the real world. Shinobi, who is also known as, a pretty reliable source within the gaming community, replied, games will always be developed with the lowest common denominator. I hate to even approach it negatively because it's not, honestly. Cross-gen games are fine, but if you want the same experience across the board, including the lower SKU, you have to design around that feature set. Digital Foundry, during their Halo Infinite breakdown, stated that a lot of the issues they felt were because the game isn't scaling well and having to use legacy systems meant for the base Xbox One. They also pointed out that Halo Infinite, that's a 10-year plan that they've mentioned. And it's clear that from the level design, they pointed stuff out that there were certain decisions made to hide parts of the game, and that had to be due to the limited capability of the Xbox One. And they came out and pretty much said, look, if you want this game to be really good, you're gonna have to kill off the Xbox One on Halo Infinite. Digital Foundry's John Linneman also said on Twitter, nobody wants to develop for an underpowered Jaguar CPU any longer. I've spoken with enough developers to know how painful the process is at this point. Leave Xbox One and PS4 behind. That was followed up by Lisa, at least I hope that's how you say that, I don't know. I'm terrible with names, so I apologize. I'm not even going to try the last name. But she's a programmer and formerly with DICE, who said, building and certifying games for a bunch of targets is hard regardless of hardware utilization. Compatibility issues in SDKs and other tooling are a thing, as are staffing and infrastructure limitations. This isn't a matter of clicking an extra button to support 10 platforms versus 9. And there's been so many more along these lines. And so you also, think about this, you also have developers that have games that are coming out on the Xbox platform who say that their games are only going to be exclusive to Xbox Series X on the Xbox platform because only that machine can handle it. So that's another way of them telling you that their games would not scale down to the Xbox One. Now, a lot of people always come back to the point that, well, like Phil said, PC games scale, and that's true. But it's only true to a certain extent. Eventually, if people don't upgrade their hardware on PC, they're going to get left behind, and those games are going to become practically unplayable because there is such a thing as minimum specs. And if you think about it, Xbox One released all the way back in 2013. And even back then, it released as an underpowered machine. Remember, the whole thing about them wanting to be the most powerful machine now was because they started off so far behind. And so you've still got a lot of machines with those limitations. You've still got a lot of OG Xboxes out in the wild that have the Jaguar CPU limitations, and you're going to try to carry that into next generation. So if Xbox One launched in 2013, how many PCs do you think from 2013 could play Flight Simulator today? So, I mean, maybe the meme Phil was talking about was Craig, because that's the biggest meme that has come out of Xbox so far. You know, I've said before, I think one solution could be that you use xCloud to deliver newer games to older systems. They could easily, I think, put xCloud on the Xbox One console, and you could say, look, these games, if you want to play them locally, they're going to be on the new hardware, but we're not going to leave you totally behind, because if you're a member or whatever of xCloud, then you can still play these games. You would just be streaming them because your system couldn't play it locally. And so there are going to be decisions made with games that they're having to cut corners and having to cut off certain features and things in order for it to work on the base Xbox One. And because of that, you're not going to see the full advantage of Xbox Series X until developers can focus solely on that. Now, there's a lot of other things going on here. You know, Microsoft also is really jumping into this whole games as a service kind of setup for a lot of their games and titles. So it's also going to be hard for Microsoft to totally cut off the base Xbox One, because they need those players to make their games as a service successful, because you got to have a large player base, and you've got PC, you know, of course, that could help, but you know, them being able to bring along the base Xbox One group that hasn't jumped over to Xbox Series X yet, that would definitely help. So that might be one reason, or at least another reason, why Microsoft is kind of hesitant to kind of go straight all in on next gen and on the Xbox Series X. But I mean, if they do change their mind, I mean, there are rumors out there, and right now they're just rumors, that are saying that Microsoft has or is considering dropping the Xbox One from Halo Infinite. And I say, if you know it helps, do it. Cut it out. Be done with it. Because again, they've said that this is a 10-year project with Halo Infinite. And I just can't see you bringing, you know, the Xbox One along for 10 more years with that. But at the same time, I think it's going to be tough for Microsoft to cut that cord off, because you know, they've already come out attacking Sony for supposedly being anti-consumer by catering to the PS5. And then now you've got a lot of those same fans who are going back and saying, look, we kind of want you to do the same thing. We want to be able to have the full power of Xbox Series X be realized, and do it a lot sooner than a couple of years. So I don't know. It's going to be tough. But if they did do that and they did backtrack, it wouldn't be like it's the first time that they've kind of backtracked on something. It seems like they do it every other week, sort of like flipping the switch on Kinect. So what do you think? Do you believe Phil? Or do you believe that there are legitimate concerns about Xbox One holding back the capabilities of the Xbox Series X? Post below. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe. That does it for me, The Red Dragon. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.
Are you listening? Damn.